Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new episode of the Stephen King podcast. This is episode 58, and our last one was a special about 11/22/63. So we didn't have any news in that one, but boy, oh boy, do we have news for you this time.
Amen.
Yes, and Lou is with me, as usual.
Hello, everyone.
Yeah. Before we kick off the news, I want to tell you that we have a very interesting interview this time. We are talking to Mark Campbell, who has written the libretto for the opera version of The Shining.
Yes. Sorry.
Yes, that is correct. An opera version of The Shining. And I'll let you decide for yourself. But I can say for myself that after we had spoken to Mark, I am very eager to see this one. I won't be able to because it's in the US, but it would be a lot of fun. So I think if you can, you should definitely go.
Mm-hmm.
I also want to mention earlier this week, I had a Q&A, a live one on the Facebook site where people could essentially ask anything they want from me, or just chat away about stuff, or post an opinion or something like that. And it was great fun. I didn't really know what to expect, but when it all was said and done, an hour and a half had passed, and a lot of questions had been asked and answered. So it was really fun, and I just want to thank everyone who participated in that. It was a lot of fun.
Awesome.
Yeah, so it will probably happen again, and maybe I can trick Lou into joining us on. We'll see about that.
Yeah, I've totally drew a blank on that. I should have been there, shouldn't I?
Yep.
Sorry about that.
Oh,
you should have reminded me or something.
Yeah, I should have. Sorry.
We should have organized that a little better. I just never even thought of it. It's just like, oh, okay.
Okay, so let's kick off the news of today.
Welcome, welcome. Do not fear the door that lies before you. We will protect you. We are your guides, Hans and Lou, and we will give you the latest in Stephen King news. But before we do so, you must prove yourself worthy. You must open the door and join us in the Deathroom.
First off is the stunning news that another Children of the Corn movie is filming as we speak. This one is called Children of the Corn Runaway. And if you don't count the remake, this will be film number 9 in the series. Yeah, it's fascinating.
Who knew corn was so popular?
Yeah. And I don't know how much this will have with Stephen King's original story, but the story follows a young pregnant woman who escaped a murderous child cult in a small Midwestern town. So I guess that's pretty much following the story somewhat. She then spends the next decade living anonymously in an attempt to spare her son the horrors that she experienced as a child. She lands in the small Oklahoma town, but something is following her. Now she must confront this evil or lose her child. Oh boy. Can you imagine?
My first question is, why are you living somewhere near corn?
Yeah.
Like, why don't you move to the desert or something?
Yeah.
Oh, boy.
Well, we have no release date for it, so we have to see, but usually this kind of movies doesn't take too long to shoot, so we should see.
Yeah, another straight-to-video, on-demand, streaming project, I'm sure. And I have to say one thing. If you're a horror buff, man, there is a ton of horror movies that you can find that go straight to video. Of course, sifting the wheat from the chaff is even a bigger job. But You can find some great horror movies there if you go to like like Dread Central or some of these horror-focused websites, and they usually have like a best of 2015 kind of list of movies. And if you can go through there and you can find some real gems. We've seen a couple of movies that were really quite impressive. But anyhow, that's just a sort of a public service horror announcement, nothing Stephen King related.
Yep.
Alrighty, our next item is to do with the Creepshow documentary titled Just Desserts. It is going to see a release on Blu-ray coming out shortly. We're not quite sure of the date yet. It's been available in the UK for some time now. Do you have a copy of this, Hans? Or
no, I don't. I actually didn't know about it until I read this, so I don't really know what to expect from it. There's a trailer from it, so
yep. And actually, there's like a large portion. I don't know how much of it, but you can see most of it is already on YouTube. And I think we reported this a couple of years ago and probably just forgot about it.
Okay.
If you Google Creepshow or search Creepshow documentary on YouTube, you'll get the behind the scenes of Creepshow, and it's broken up into 9 parts because I guess they can't exceed like the 20-minute length or whatever the restriction it is. But there's 9 segments here, but still it would be nice to have it in good Blu-ray quality because this is low quality stuff. But if you want to sort of get like a sneak peek at what it's all about, it's quite good. So yeah, it's large portions of it are already out on YouTube celebrating and that was back in 2012, celebrating the film's 30th anniversary. But the YouTube guy is Goremaster, and it sounds like he's the same person that's responsible for the Blu-ray. I would love to get this on Blu-ray, get a nice high quality.
Yeah.
Felshire is his name. So if you want to get a sneak peek, check it out on Blu-ray. Otherwise, as soon as we get a date, we will of course update it. Hans will update it on his website. That's so that you can order it.
Yeah, and I think it's always interesting to see behind the scenes how movies were done, and usually there aren't much behind the scenes footage from older movies, because this was typically something that started with DVDs and Blu-rays where you can add this stuff. So this is interesting that there seems to be so much behind the scenes footage from this one.
Right.
Okay, next up is some very good news for those of us who is still waiting to see Cell on the movie screen. The movie, who has been done for, I don't know, but a very long time, has finally gotten a US distributor, and it's called Saban Films. There's no date set yet, but hopefully it will be out this year. I can't imagine them getting the distributions rights for a movie that's been done this long and then not publishing it as soon as they can.
Well, I don't know. This movie's been in the can for so long, and you think they would just have gotten it out by now. And we don't even know what Saban Films, what their distribution plan is. Maybe it's not even going to be a theatrical release. It might just be, like a streaming deal with, if not Netflix, with Amazon or Hulu Prime or something like that. So we'll have to see.
Yeah.
But I have a feeling whatever distribution it gets theatrically, it's going to be pretty limited.
Yeah, I guess so. But it's hopefully it will be out soon at least, so we can see it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then our next story, and this story was released on April 1st, so you were a little hesitant to post about this at first, Hans, understandably. But it did seem to pan out, and it's a Warner project, so it does have a big studio behind it. And Akiva Goldsman, who, depending on your perspective, either is going to make you happy or sad, is apparently going to adapt Dr. Sleep for the big screen. Of course, this is very preliminary, and such an early announcement is subject to change. We don't know how this is going to play out, but not surprisingly, Dr. Sleep is going to be adapted for the big screen, and where that takes us, we'll have to see. But I can't say I'm surprised about this development at all. Are you?
No, not at all. I'm surprised it's taken so long to do it.
Yeah.
But as usual, I almost say, we get a lot of reports about him or her doing this and that movie, and then nothing more happens. There's a lot of adaptation that's reported to be done and ready to go, but nothing happens. So far, we don't know how much this will happen. So I guess we'll wait and see.
Mm-hmm.
Next thing is something that is actually happening right now, and that is that The Dark Tower has started filming.
Woohoo!
Yay! It was reported earlier that they would shoot in South Africa, so I'm guessing that's where they are right now. And filming has started, and the release date is still February 17, I think, or 13 next year. Mm-hmm. So I guess they could keep that schedule if they. I don't know how long they usually keep film a movie, but I guess it's somewhere 5-6 months, right?
Yeah, 3 to 6 months, and then usually about up to a year of post-production work, depending on how many special effects there are. So easily doable for them to have this ready to go for next February.
Yeah.
All right, so that's very exciting news. And continuing with the Dark Tower news, even some additional exciting news, at least for me, is Jackie Earle Haley. You might know him best as Rorschach from the Watchmen movie that Snyder did before he got into his DC superhero movies, is in negotiations to play one of the low men. Will play Sayre, who is a vampire leader and kowtows to no one. Richard Patrick Sayre is a high-ranking Cantoi and a member of the Somber Corporation. He has the usual low man fashion sense, dressing himself in a garish suit. He also has the pool of blood on his forehead that never spills over. And we know Sayre from the Wolves of Kala, and he's also in a pivotal scene, of course, in the Dixie Pig, as Susanna is giving birth. So another great character actor, and if they got him to play this part, I think that would be really exciting.
Yeah. One thing that has gotten me a little bit, I won't say concerned, but confused is a better word, is that a lot of these casting we hear is for characters that you, at first sight, you think, oh, who is that? Has he really been in the Dark Tower? And then when you look it up, they are having smaller parts, and it's spread out all between book 1 and 7 almost. So it's confusing to me that they are making such a huge casting announcement for smaller part, and also that they are seeming to take the story from a very wide range of King's books. Mm-hmm. So it makes me wonder what they are trying to do here. If we'll get a lot of jumps back and forth, or if they have restructured the storyline, or well, it's not what I expected to come out as as they announced more casting news.
Right. Well, I think what you have to keep in mind is here, when they're releasing this press release, they're basically giving the character's whole arc in the series, right? We don't know how much of what they're telling us is that he's actually going to be filmed doing in this first movie. So, like, I don't think we're going to see him with Susanna in the Dixie Pig waiting for the baby to be born. I don't even think we're going to get that far in this first movie. But I think they're just telling us what his arc is, and because he probably will just be like the bad guy chasing Roland and his quartet in the movie, and that's as far as his part will go.
Yeah.
And to all the other stuff that's coming will happen in later movies. So I think we have to parse a little carefully what they're releasing with this, but I think he's going to basically just be playing the bad guy in this movie.
Yeah, it will be interesting to see.
Mm-hmm. Are you familiar with him?
No, not really. I can't say I am. No.
Yeah, he's
but
a good actor.
He looks scary.
Yeah, he was in a TV series too for a couple of years.
Okay.
I cannot remember the name of it. But he was like a weapons expert in that series. If you look him up on IMDb, and I'll do that while Hans is doing the next story, and then I'll come up with a series name. If you want to sort of give a flavor of what he's like, if you haven't seen that series, or if you haven't seen Watchmen, then I recommend checking it out.
Yeah, and the next news is also about filming, and that is that the remake of It is scheduled to start filming in Toronto June 27.
Wow, another Toronto production, man.
Yeah, and all the way to September 6th. And this was reported in a magazine, so I guess hopefully it's true, and hopefully this will get the It movie going, and so we can see that soon as well. And hopefully they will do a good job on it with the special effects that's available for you today, and also the storyline.
Right. Yes, for sure. And I'm glad that I think the most significant news that came out of that is that they're still planning to do 2 movies. So
yeah,
I don't know how many changes. I'm sure there's been changes to the scripts that Fukunaga version. There's probably been changes, but it's the fact that they're keeping the basic structure of those two movies and tying them together. I really like that, and I hope they keep that. Okay, following up on Jack Hurley Haley, he was in, the series was called Human Target, and he played Guerrero in that series. So you should check it out because he's a weapons expert in that, and he's pretty badass in it. He's kind of like a man with no name, very quiet, but when he just looks at you, you can sort of feel your blood chilling. So I think he'll be great in the Dark Tower series. And also, for you horror freaks like Hans, he was also in the Nightmare on Elm Street remake as Freddy Krueger. But I don't think that movie wasn't very good. But
no, that was a horrible movie. But then I know a little bit more of who he is.
All right, so next up is another movie production currently on the books, and this one is being, last we heard, helmed by Josh Boone, is Revival. And Hans has up on his website a great piece of concept art by artist Vincent Chong, who's getting rather well known for doing a lot of Stephen King-based artwork. And this has a pretty cool picture of an ant coming out of is it a birthday cake, I guess?
Yeah, I think it
or
is.
A donut? I'm not quite sure what it is, because it's a tight picture, so it's really hard to get a sense of it. But
yeah, I think it's a birthday cake.
Yeah, so, yeah, that's pretty cool.
It doesn't really say much about the story, but I guess it gives you the creepy feeling that they want you to have for it.
Yes. And I have to be honest, this doesn't ring a bell with me from the book at all. Does it for you? Or I don't remember this particular moment, but
no. I don't.
Okay.
I don't remember that as well. But it's a scary picture, and it's with everything Vincent Chong is doing. It's a great picture. He's a great artist.
Yeah.
And Josh also told me that they should start filming later this summer, and that they are casting now. So hopefully we will have more news about that.
Yeah. And did he say where they're filming this? Is this in Toronto as well? Or?
No, he didn't mention where they would film it.
Okay.
Okay, and the next news is also about something new. We've heard about it what was mentioned before, and this is that the TV channel Spike TV has ordered a 10-episode The Mist TV show, and we heard for some time ago that they had ordered just a pilot.
Right.
And apparently they liked the script for the pilot so much that they changed the order for one pilot to 10 episodes.
Awesome.
Yeah, so and I think that you have to see this one as that King's story will probably be the pilot, or maybe the two first episodes, and that will be probably the story where they are in the store and everything, and end with them leaving, and then the story will go on and tell them driving around trying to find people and stuff like that. So right. I don't think you should see this as all 10 episodes will be. I read someone being concerned that they were going to stay in the grocery store for 10 episodes. But I don't think that will be the case, because I think that would be a disaster. I think that would be too long in the store.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we should see this pretty much like Haven or the Dead Zone, that the source material is the starting stone, and then they will branch off and take the story on its own.
Mm-hmm.
But I think this could, I mean, if you see it like that, it could be a great story to expand. I mean,
absolutely. Yeah.
You have a wide range of things that could happen. They could go. They aren't restricted to stay in one place. They could go places. They could meet up with other peoples. So I think if done right, it could be a good series.
Mm-hmm.
As long as you think that it will all be based on King's short story.
Yeah, and for those people that didn't like the movie ending, they'll have a chance to see an alternative version, which will have to follow the original novella version, because that we know that continued on once they got out of the grocery store. So I'm really excited to see where they go with this, and I hope that they keep it to this kind of 10-13 episode season arc. I think it would work well. I think if they try to expand it to a 22 season arc, I think that would start to cause problems, because you can't keep that kind of tension going up. And it'll be very interesting to see how they extrapolate from the novella as to how they're, what are they going to do? Are they going to always be in the mist, or are they going to find spots like for a while that they get out of the mist and can sort of relax for a bit, or is it just going to be relentless?
Yeah.
I think it'll be rather cool, and I'm really looking forward to this. I think it'll be a nice change of pace from a lot of the other stuff that's out on TV right now. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I think that if they were to use the movie ending in the pilot, it would be a very depressing 8 or 9 episodes left.
Well, I don't see how they can because the mist dispersed at the end of that version. So
yeah, that's right. It could come back.
It could, yeah. The government could make the same mistake again, right?
Yep.
All right, cool. So turning from movies and TV, we're actually getting back to some writing news from Stephen King, and apparently he is going to have a short story in a anthology collection that Lawrence Block is putting together, and the anthology is called In Shadow or in Sunlight or in Shadow. Stories inspired by the paintings of Edward Hopper. And Edward Hopper is described as one of the greatest American narrative painters. His work bears special resonance for writers and readers, and yet his paintings never tell a story so much as they invite viewers to find for themselves the untold stories within. So that's a pretty good blurb for promoting a book, and quite a great cast of writers in here too, besides obviously Stephen King, Joyce Carol Oates, Robert Butler, Michael Connelly, Megan Abbott, Craig Ferguson, Nicholas Christopher, Jill Block, Joe Lansdale, Spider Robinson, Christian Catherine Rush, Warren Moore, Jonathan Santlofer, Jeffrey Deaver, Lee Child, and Lawrence Block himself. So it looks like it's going to be a lovely collection, well worth getting, and it's also going to have 17 full-color plates, one for each story. So hopefully they're going to come up with a really cool one for the Stephen King Music Room story, which I don't know anything about. Do you have any idea of what the story is about at all? Or
no, I don't know anything about it.
Okay.
Other than what you just said. So I guess probably we'll know a little bit more before it's released, or not, and it will just be a surprise when it's out. And it won't be out until December, so it will be a while until we see that one.
Okay.
And the next one is, it's actually a kind of interesting story how this April Fool's Day can make people go crazy. I tend to try to not post any news on April 1st because I don't want people to think that I'm posting jokes, and I don't post jokes because I think it's cruel to tease people with it if it's not very, very obvious.
Yeah, plus it undermines your site's credibility too if you're posting false stories.
Exactly.
Yep.
Yeah. So, but this came from a photo King posted on his Facebook and Twitter accounts on some kind of demonstration. He asked if people could spot him in the photo, which a lot of people did. And then he posted that this is a photo from the new book, Hearts in Suspension. And that he posted on April 1st. So people didn't know, is this a April Fool's joke? And the Hearts in is teasing that it would be something like Hearts in Atlantis or a follow-up to that. And a lot of people thought it was a follow-up book to Hearts in Atlantis as well. But it turns out that it's, of course, a lot of people suspected that it would be the fall Stephen King book that's coming out this fall, that we don't know anything about yet, or if there even will be a book this fall. So there was a lot of confusion a couple of days, because I think April 1st was on a Friday or a Saturday, so we didn't know much for a couple of days. But it turned out that it's not a new Stephen King book, and it's not a April Fool's Day joke. It's actually a book, but it's a non-fiction book with essays by Stephen and other about the time that he spent as a student at the University of Maine. So it's being published in October, so there will be an October book if you count this one. But it's not a new Stephen King novel, it's a non-fiction book about he and his classmates in the University of Maine. So I think it could be an interesting book to read, though.
Yeah, for sure. I wonder if it's maybe been fueled a little bit by the events of this year's presidential campaigns. That we'll have to see.
Yeah.
All right. So continuing with on the interview scheme, and Hans, you posted a link to an article on April 7th where Stephen King will announce that he will be joined by Game of Thrones author George R.R. Martin to promote his new book, End of Watch, in Albuquerque. And this will be at the Albuquerque Indie Bookstore Bookworks, June 16th. I'm sorry, it's not at, but it's being hosted by the Indie Bookstore Bookworks. The actual appearance will take place at the, can you imagine George Martin and Stephen King in a bookstore? That would be a little crowded. It's going to be at the Kiva Auditorium at the Albuquerque Convention Center. And this is one of 12 stops on King's tour for his book, End of Watch. And obviously getting George R. R. Martin to do the interview is quite a coup. And two of the probably best loved authors out there right now getting together is should be quite the event. And I'm going to be very jealous. I'm already very jealous of anybody that gets to go to this.
Yeah.
So, man, oh man.
I also read that George R. R. Martin would be at, I don't remember where it was, but something with Joe Hill as well.
Oh, okay.
Something with him, yeah. So, and I'm a little bit torn there because it's cool and fun that he's doing this, but on the other hand, I just want to scream at him to go back and finish his books that everybody's been waiting for.
Yeah, well, that's, he works at his own pace. He's not writing, he's not going to finish just for us, but yeah. And also that other event is Stephen. Oh, it's another guy is going to be interviewing Joe Hill for his new book, The Fireman, on May 23rd at the Kiva Auditorium as well. So it sounds like there's a lot of stuff going on there with that tour. It's not really quite clear in this paragraph. I'm sorry if I'm not stating this clearly. I'm not sure if it's Stephen King is going to be with Joe Hill on May 23rd. I think it's
R. Martin who will be with Joe Hill.
Oh, okay. That's pretty cool. And I'm hearing really great things about Joe Hill's new book, The Fireman. I can't wait to read it. It sounds like his version of The Stand in some ways. So
yeah, it's a great book.
Oh, you've read it already, have you?
I have. Yep.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Nice. Have you read End of Watch too?
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay.
No. But about the End of Watch tour, it begins on June 7 and ends June 18, and King would do one stop each day between those dates. And if you head over to stephenking.com, you will see a lot of information about each of those events. And for those of you who's wishing for a signing, there will not be a signing on this. It will just be a reading or a interview section. But there will be 400 pre-signed books at every event. So King will have a lot of signing to do before June 7. But those books will be distributed randomly if you buy a book at these events. So you won't know beforehand if you get a signed one or if you get an unsigned book. And this, as you mentioned, Lou, that these are arranged by bookstores but take place in bigger arenas. Mm-hmm. So obviously there will be more than 400 people at the events, so not everyone will get a signed book, except for one place, and I am not sure, but I think it was the Barnes & Noble on June 18, who have decided to have the event in the store and are only selling 400 tickets. So at that event, everyone will get a signed copy.
Right.
But I'm not sure. I think it was the Barnes & Noble event, but if you're interested in going, please check it out. And so I'm not lying to you. It would be terrible if I did. Yeah. So check it out. And as usual, if you get a lot of cool photos, send them to me, and I will be happy to post them on the site.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Next up is a really fun commercial that King did with IBM's Watson, and they talk about storytelling and how that should be done. And it's hard to explain this one, so I think you should just head over to my site, go to the news for April 8th and check it out for yourself. I had no idea Steve would do this.
I kind of thought I thought he was sort of off doing commercials anymore, but
Yeah.
Especially after the was it American Express. He's kind of said that was the last one he would do, I thought. But I guess he thought this was a fun little one.
Yeah.
And at this different circumstances now too. It's been a long time since he did that other one, and I think he is probably feeling now that if I do commercials, it's not really going to change his life that much anyhow. So
yeah,
what the heck? And it was fun. It was fun.
Yeah, it's
cool.
Fun. Yeah.
So I guess depending on how you want to slice it, if you consider this Hearts in Suspension a second book by King, I guess he's keeping his streak alive, but it's not a fiction book.
No, I don't think we should see it as a second Stephen King book this year.
Okay, so
I won't count it as that at least.
Yeah, so this news that King is between books, which is like the first time I think I've ever heard of this, because he's always writing, right? So it seems like he's trying to decide or he's just waiting for something to grab his attention, or maybe he's just not fully percolated an idea that he wants to start yet. But while he's doing that, and I guess it's partly because he's come to the end of the Bill Hodges trilogy, so he's not quite sure what he wants to do next. I'm kind of surprised that he's not jumping at this time to go finish the Sawyer books with Peter Straub. But
but I think Straub have had some health problems, so I think he's not up to it now.
Oh, okay.
So I think that might be the reason that they are not doing it now.
Okay.
And also just that he is between books doesn't mean that he hasn't written one that's not published.
This is true.
He might have some laying around for this fall as well.
But it doesn't seem possible now that they're going to release a second fiction book this year, especially if they've already made the announcement for the November release date of this nonfiction book, which would have been the date that his second fiction book would have came out based on a previous year's. So.
Yeah, but they don't have to exclude one doesn't have to exclude the other one, so it could still happen. I'm still positive.
Okay, all right. It's running out of time to make that announcement, though.
And it's scary because, scary might not be the right word. I mean, there's a lot of things that's scarier than this. But if we don't hear any announcement of a next Stephen King book in the next 51 days, we will be in a place that we have End of Watch is released, and we have no idea what the next book will be. Right. And I can't really remember when that happened last time, because there's always been another book announced. So even when the latest book is released, we have always known something, even if we haven't known the release date exactly, which we have often. We have often know what's coming, but that might be the case now that we don't. So that's, I won't say scary, but it's an annoying feeling.
Come on, Steve, get your act together.
Yeah.
Slacking off. But he might still he might save that record in the before the 51 days are over, because he did announce that he is in the final stages of collaborating on a book with his son Owen. So they could announce within the next 50 days that we're working on this book and this is what it's going to be called.
Yeah.
So that is an interesting bit of news for me, because I've read Owen's book and he writes in quite a different playing field than his father does, and even his brother. So Stephen and Joe, you can see them working together because they're so similar in their writing styles. But Owen King writes more slice of life kind of material so far that I've read. So I have no idea what they're collaborating on, and it'll be very interesting to see what they're going to do. Is Owen going to get dragged into the dark, or is Stephen going to get dragged into the light? We'll have to see.
I think if I would guess, I'd say that it's probably not a horror story.
Yeah.
That's just a guess, though, but I don't think it will be.
Mm-hmm. So that brings us to the end of our news, but Hans has an announcement.
Yes. Speaking of The Fireman by Joe Hill, there is currently a contest running on my site. It runs until May 10, and all you have to do is go to the contest site, scroll down, and answer 3 easy questions. And for that, you could win a signed copy of The Fireman by Joe Hill. And cool. It won't just be signed, it will be personalized by Joe Hill to the winner.
Nice.
So 3 lucky winners will get a copy of The Fireman signed and personalized by Joe Hill.
Fantastic.
Yeah, it's a great prize.
Mm-hmm. as we said earlier, they're hearing a lot of great things about the book. And
Yes.
how many pages is it, Hans?
It's just a bit over 700.
Wow.
So it's a long book.
Yeah, awesome.
I think I read it in like 6 days.
Oh,
5, 6
you're
days.
jumping. Wow.
And I'm a slow reader usually. So
there you go.
A book at 700 pages takes me a very long time to read,
Mm-hmm.
or
Wow.
longer than 5, 6 days at least. So
Fantastic.
I enjoyed it a lot.
Mm-hmm. Did it? I don't know. Maybe that'd be too spoilery. Did it remind you of any other Stephen King books, or?
Yeah, it's a kind of a end of the world book.
Okay. All right.
Or so at least it start off in that direction.
All right.
So of course it's in the same playing field as The Stand, but it's totally different.
Okay.
So
awesome.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I'm looking forward to it, and good luck to all the listeners out there. You got until May 10th, so get on those questions over at Hans' site. Look on his post from April 11th and enter the contest. I already have, so I've got to win one of your contests sooner or later.
Yeah. Yep. Okay, and that is the news for this episode.
All right. Great.
And now we visit the King Crate and see what Miss Treasures, the Fluffy the Crate creature from Creepshow, has left for us to examine.
Okay, so we are here with Mark Campbell, who is you're doing The Shining as an opera. We thought this was very interesting, so we asked you to talk a bit about it with us. And we're gonna confess up front that we are really not opera people. So if we act very strange,
I'm not an opera person. So okay. I only write it. I only write opera. I can't say that I know the history of opera or that I see opera every weekend.
Okay.
But I think that in my email to you, I said that I think that we both bond over good storytelling.
Right.
Yeah.
And when opera is doing its job, it's the same thing as Stephen King does, and that's tell an excellent story.
Yeah. So can you start by telling us a little bit how this happened and how you choose The Shining for doing this?
It's not very exciting, and I have to say that it wasn't my choice. The project basically happened when Dale Johnson, who is the artistic director of Minnesota Opera, met with a stage director named Eric Simonson, who will be directing The Shining. They met and they said, you know what? Minnesota Opera creates all these fantastic new American operas, and they said, you know what? There has never been a real opera, a real horror opera, a story in opera. I mean, many of them have, a lot of operas have a lot of deaths and a lot of murders, but no one has really taken a horror story and turned it into an opera that has entered the repertory with any regularity. So Eric suggested The Shining, and Dale said, no, I think that's a terrible idea. And then he said, but let me read it. And then he read it, and he said that when you read the novel, which we all know is so much different than the movie, Dale said, absolutely, there is a real opera story here. And then they approached the composer Paul Moravec, who's won a Pulitzer Prize. He's a very, very respected composer in the business, and asked him what he thought, and he thought it was an excellent idea. They approached me, and I said pretty much the same thing that Dale said. I said, I don't know. Let me read the novel, because my experience with The Shining is unfortunately just from the movie. And I love the movie, don't get me wrong, but the movie is not the story that Stephen King told, as everyone who's paying attention to this podcast is aware.
Right.
And you guys are way ahead of me when it comes to Stephen King and everything like that. But I read the novel and I said, indeed, there is an opera here. There is a character who is really struggling with some serious demons, who makes a bad career move by going to the Overlook Hotel. And this is a man and this is a family who is facing the most incredible odds and just really wants to try to stay together. And it doesn't help that they have a son who has psychic powers. So there were all these elements, and I said, yes, I'm very excited about this. And I'm glad that my original prejudices and fears about turning this into an opera have, they've just completely disappeared.
Okay. I'm curious, how have you read any Stephen King before you'd done this, or?
Yes, I had, but I had read like stories.
Okay.
And I don't remember which ones, I'm sorry, because it was a while ago. I feel like I probably read Carrie a while ago. I read the obvious ones. And I think you guys are doing such a great job, because I think like most, there's an incredible snobbery out there about Stephen King, where people don't give him enough credit as a writer. I think they view him as like, oh, he's just this guy who creates these scary stories. There's a lot more depth and profound emotions and feelings in these stories than I think he's given credit for. Of course, I don't think he cares personally what other people think, and bless him for that, because he's our most successful writer. So it's been really incredible, and I now want to read, when I can find the time with all these operas I'm writing, I now want to read a lot more of his work, because I think there are other stories there that are really ripe for any kind of musical treatment.
Do you write scripts for movies and stuff like that as well, or?
I wrote one movie script, and it never went anywhere, and it's a damn good movie script too. But it never went anywhere, and I have to say, I am just a writer who is used to writing with composers. Other than that one movie script, everything that I've written has been sung, has been meant to be sung. I don't know why. I love opera. I mean, I love what the potential for opera, where opera can go. And I think in this country, we are really exploring that. There have been a lot of amazing new American operas. In fact, there are 3 opening in the same period as The Shining. Well, I mean, 2 other operas opening in the same period as The Shining. And one is Scarlet Letter at Opera Colorado, and then JFK at Fort Worth Opera. And these are very different stories, but they're all about, in a certain way, an American experience.
Wow.
Yeah, because I wanted to see how it is different to write for something that's sung that compared to a traditional movie script. I imagine that it must be harder to get things across when you sing them than when you act like in the movies.
Oh, it's very different. And that's why I'm employed, because I seem to know how to do that. But it's extremely different. In adapting this novel, for example, we had to be aware of the character of Danny, because he will be on stage with these massively voiced opera singers. The guy who plays Jack is, wow, Brian Mulligan. He has the most incredible, just powerful, booming baritone, and he's a brilliant actor. Same with Kelly Caduce, who's playing Wendy. All of our cast is really stellar, but we have Danny. He's a boy. His voice is not as strong as the others, and so I really had to reduce the number of lines he has, spoken lines. Often it's just a reaction or something like that, because in opera, if the voice is not as strong as the other people that you're on stage with, the energy can drop out of the opera. Mm-hmm. And so Danny in this libretto has far fewer lines. His presence is as strong. He just doesn't get to sing as much.
All right. Fascinating. I'm wondering, like, when you're first of all, did you have to get permission from Stephen King to do an opera based on his book?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Was that a difficult process, or was it a fairly quick turnaround, or?
There's actually a very nice story about this. A quick turnaround is no, it wasn't. I think it might have been 5 years ago when people started saying, yeah, let's do The Shining. Oh, okay. Minnesota Opera has very capable lawyers, and they tried to work with Stephen King's lawyers, but then I think the lawyers changed. Oh. And yes, of course we have to buy the rights to do this. The lawyers changed, and then it just got stalled. We didn't know what was going on. And the composer, Paul Moravec, was getting really frustrated. And I started calling this, I said, let's not call it The Shining, let's call it The Signing. because it was just taking so long, and it just seemed like everything was so confusing. Paul eventually contacted someone he knows named Peter Straub, who you all are familiar with.
Yes, yes.
And he just said, "Hey, we really want to do this opera, and I heard that Stephen King wants it done, but we can't break through this wall of lawyers that needs to protect Stephen King. Can you help me out?" And of course, Peter Straub said, "Yeah, sure." And he said, Paul said, "Could you just give me Stephen King's email address so I can email him?" Peter Straub said, "Sure." And so Paul emailed him. Within 20 minutes, Stephen King got back to him and said, "I don't know why there's a problem. I want this to happen too." And I think, like, within a couple months, like, the contract went forward and there was no problem. But he has approval over the libretto. He approved the libretto in less than 24 hours, which was a real happy news on my part, because above all, I wanted to make sure that the libretto, which is different from the novel, I wanted to make sure that the libretto captures the spirit of his beautiful work. It's extremely important to me, and that he approved it so quickly made me very happy. And he has approval over other things, but so far he's been absolutely wonderful. I mean, I have had no direct contact with him, unfortunately. I'd like to, because I'd really like to meet him and thank him for writing this incredible novel.
Right.
As you guys already know, he's a lovely man with just really progressive views, which is what I am. I mean, I'm not saying I'm a lovely man, but I have very progressive, and that would be pretty sick. But I'd love to talk with him and just thank him for writing what he's written. You guys have met him, right?
Hans has.
Yes.
I've seen him from a distance.
Yeah.
I haven't even had that experience. So,
do you know if he's planning to come to the show at all?
Oh man, I hope he does. I really, really want him to be there, and we're working on it through his lawyers, though.
Yeah, of course.
And maybe he's listening to this right now, and he's booking his flight, as if he would ever book his own flight.
He doesn't like flying.
He doesn't. Me neither. I hate flying.
So he had no changes for you to make to your libretto?
No, he approved it completely as it was written. When people have tried to make changes after it was approved, I've said, if we're going to make this kind of a change, then I have to get approval from him.
Right.
Because I want to make sure that he's aware of any kind of thing that might be changed. And that also went by quickly. I think there was one thing that needed to be changed. The Denver croquet in The Shining, that big mallet. Originally, I had to explain that right away because it just made the story simpler. And he approved that very, very quickly. From what I hear, I mean, I haven't collaborated with him directly, but from everyone I've heard, he's a very collaborative man and is willing to give artists their space to take a work that he's written and turn it into another form. And opera is a really radically different form. So it was a very happy day in my life when he said, "This is great, go forward with it."
I bet.
Let's hope you meet him in person when at one of the shows.
Yes.
Exactly.
Is there any chance that this will be taped so you can watch it later on if you can't be there in person?
Yes, actually, and I'm sorry I don't have more information about this, but Minnesota Public Radio will be, at least at one point, they were going to be live streaming it. But I don't have more information on that, and I can get it for you. So maybe you could post it on your blog or...
Sure.
Yeah, we'd be glad to, yeah.
Yeah, that would be great, especially for people around the world who will not be able to get to Minneapolis. The entire run is very, very close to being sold out. I think we only have a couple of tickets on the Sunday matinee.
Wow.
And next week, I'm pretty sure, maybe after this podcast, people will be flying to Minneapolis to watch the opera.
Maybe.
It will. It's very close to being sold out, and it's in a large theater, the Ordway. So, yeah, it's exciting. I mean, one other thing that I should mention is that Eric Simonson, our director, is also creating a very exciting visual production because there are going to be a lot of people are going to be coming to this opera only thinking about the movie, and the movie did have amazing visuals in it.
Mm-hmm.
But opera is different. And so I think we won't just have the naked woman in the shower, Mrs. Massey. We are both having the naked woman in the shower in a bodysuit, mind you. This is Minneapolis. But a bodysuit that was made by people who work in Hollywood, so that the flesh is it's not pretty flesh.
Right.
But not only that, we will have a 40-foot projection of her behind, on the stage behind her, so that we really want to scare the bejesus out of the audience. We really do. I want them to be terrified, and then I also want them to be moved. And I think there are equal doses of that in the novel. I think there are very moving sections where Jack doesn't know what's happening to him, and he is struggling with his alcoholism. He's also struggling with his own psychological demons. His father, as you know, Mark Torrance, abused him. And for me, this opera is very much about how the power of love may be able to overcome generations of abuse in a family. That was a theme that I defined early on, and that's what our opera is about.
Do you know if there's a lot of people coming from out of town, coming just to see this?
There are. One thing Minnesota has a very, very loyal audience. Minneapolis is an incredible city with lots of theater. Whenever a new opera is done, it usually does really, really well. And it's not easy to sell a new opera because people are scared of the music. They're scared it's going to be pretentious and boring, the way opera often is. But I think with The Shining, they know that it's a story that they know. We've had some people call up saying, "Oh, is it scary? Is it violent? I don't know if I can go." And yet, last week they went to see Otello, where there's 5 dead bodies, there's stabbings all over the place. They don't mind it if it's a classic work. But anyway, to go back to your question, there are a number of people coming from outside of the country. I kind of wish there were more, but I think Minnesota gobbled up all the tickets early on. We have a number of opera companies from around the country coming to this, which bodes well for future productions of the opera.
Yeah, because that's one of the frustrating things when you don't live in the US. You often miss these things.
Yeah, but even when you live in the U.S., you miss these things.
Yeah.
Sometimes. I mean, I live in New York. I should be seeing everything. There's a point where I should be going. I went to Carnegie Hall last night, and I saw my friend Kevin Putz, who I wrote an opera with, Silent Night. He had a premiere of a orchestral piece, and I went to see that, and I thought, God, I should be going to Carnegie Hall more often. But sometimes, you know what? You just want to stay home and have a good meal. I don't know. That makes me sound so old and boring, but I don't know. If you're working really hard, that's what happens.
Yeah.
So I think you've sort of answered this question already, because you said you wanted to focus on the theme of family, of love, being able to overcome family history. But still, you're looking at a 400-plus page novel, and you've gotten it down to roughly 40 pages opera. How difficult of a process was that or how did you decide that, I can't do this, I can't do that? Did you know ahead of time the number of sets that you would have available to you? Is there a pre-meeting before you start writing it to say this is what we can afford to do, sort of thing? What's the process for that?
Not really. I mean, I've worked with Minnesota Opera. This is my 5th opera with Minnesota Opera. Mm-hmm. And so I know that they have a great budget and they're very generous, but I also know it's not the Met. I can't squander money the way the Metropolitan Opera does. So I know, and also I started writing in theater where we have to be cheap all the time.
Sure.
But so I go into this, I wouldn't say that I think I can't do this based on money. I think of it more on an economy of story. Mm-hmm. For example, the topiary in the novel.
Right.
That's a really hard thing to do on stage. And I also have to say, and forgive me for saying this, I also have to say it didn't scare me that much in the novel. It just didn't scare me that much. And I also just knew that on stage it would be really hard to do. And potentially, if it's not done well, it could look really funny. And so that was one of the first decisions. I mean, my first decision with this after reading the novel was, okay, one set, the Overlook Hotel. And actually it's two sets because we do the epilogue in Maine.
Mm-hmm.
You'll remember in the novel that it shifts to the story after the Overlook blows up.
Right.
And we're now in Maine with Halloran, Danny, and Wendy. And it's a really beautiful scene, and there's no way I could lose that scene. That scene is so lyrical, and we need that after all of this darkness.
Mm-hmm.
At any rate, I did eliminate all of the scenes in Boulder at the beginning. We start right at the Overlook. Well, now I'm lying. We actually start on a scenic overlook, looking at the Overlook Hotel from the distance. They have stopped in the Volkswagen, and they're looking at it, and they're singing about this beautiful new life that they will have. And we bring up some shadows of the past, but we don't mention it, explicitly. But Wendy and Jack have this beautiful duet about, like, we have a new life now. Things are different. This is a fresh start.
Right.
So, and the reason I wanted to write that is because I wanted the audience to feel right away. I wanted them to like these people right away.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone in their life has been able, or we all think about being able to have a fresh start. So, and only Danny has like a little vision at that moment, and it's only picked up in the orchestra. He doesn't sing about it or anything, but he looks off and the orchestra suddenly goes dark. And then the rest of the opera, other than the epilogue, is set in the Overlook. So that was one decision. Another decision is that I really tightened up the time in the story.
Mm-hmm.
Right now it starts at the end of September and it goes into about mid-November. And the reason for that is because I think it's just more suspenseful. Now, like the topiary are gone. I had to get rid of, wow, I'm not going to think of his name. Danny's persona, you guys will know.
Oh,
what's the name of
his older self?
Yeah, his alter ego. Mm-hmm. Yeah, his older self. I had to get rid of that because it was just going to be really hard to make that work on stage with a kid.
Yeah.
It works fine in a movie and it works great in the novel, but on stage it just would have been an issue. And the more I started working on the libretto, I kept it in the back of my mind, like, could I make this happen? But the more I worked on the libretto, I found out that it really wasn't necessary in telling this story for the opera.
Mm-hmm.
And, I would just say all the other decisions were like, what is necessary to move this along really quickly, keep it suspenseful, and stay out of the way of the music? Because music is this giant thing that comes in and will take over. If it's any good, it will take over because it is opera. And no one's speaking. They're going to be singing.
Right.
So all of the phrases have to be very short. There's some repetition. I'm trying to think what else. I was very excited reading the novel to see that Halloran is kind of our hero.
Mm-hmm.
And if you would choose a hero in kind of an obvious way, I mean, Halloran does rescue them. I was really excited about that. So he became a major character. Mark Torrance, Jack's father who abused him, comes back from the dead and makes an appearance. And there's a beautiful scene after this scene where Danny gets locked in the bathroom and he emerges and asks about red rum. Wendy sings a lullaby to Danny to try to assuage his fears and to calm everyone down. As she does that, Mark Torrance appears in Jack's memory with a cane. And he's singing to Jack about, like, come and take your medicine, and you deserve this. And so Jack has a memory about when he was abused as a child. So it pretty much screws up the beauty of that lullaby with this really frightening music. And when Mark Torrance enters, it's terrifying. Another scene, sorry, I'm really blabbing, guys. If I'm talking too much, just tell me to shut up. But
it's all good. No, it's
go on.
Oh, okay, yeah. Cool. But maybe your audience is not used to knowing about like an opera based on The Shining, so it might be interesting.
Absolutely, that's why we're just as interested as they are. So keep going.
Another thing that when you adapt from such a great novel, when you've got so much good material, it is really hard to say, no, I can't do that. Boy, I really want to do that. Oh, the wasp nest.
Yep.
At the beginning, I think it's terrifying. It's so well written and so scary, and I really love that. That one was really hard for me to kill.
Mm.
And I can tell you why. It just, a wasp in a theater that holds 2,500 people, a wasp nest will just not read. It will be hard for the audience to feel the impact of that. And so I hated losing that one. It's interesting that the topiary were too big and I think difficult to manage, whereas the wasps, where it was too small, but so much more effective. So that had to go. But one thing that really stayed is the scene where Jack Torrance hears his father's voice over the CB radio. And when you suddenly hear him say, "Kill him," I said, there is no way that is not going to be in the opera. And since it involves a disembodied voice, so it's an aural thing, I knew that it would be very effective in opera. And actually, I think Paul Moravec, like a week later, said, "You're going to include that scene because I think that's really scary." And so we did. I will tell you also, this is the nature of collaboration. Originally, I made, and this is a little bit embarrassing, but Mrs. Massey, the naked lady in the bathtub, originally, it was really hard for me to make that work in the structure of the libretto. And the first draft of the libretto did not have the woman herself in the libretto. She came out as a ghost later, but it did not have the whole bathroom scene, the bathroom scene where Danny goes in and then Mrs. Massey is there. And,
room 217.
Yeah, not 227 or whatever the, what is it in the movie? Is it 227?
I think it's 237.
237 in the movie. You're right. Oh, you guys, I have a really funny story. So, which I'll get to in a second. At any rate, I didn't have that in the libretto originally. And Eric Simonson, the director, said, "Oh my God, there is no way you're not including that." That scared me for like 20 years of my life. And you are not depriving me or anyone of the audience from that. He didn't speak that way. I'm he's far kinder and gentler and more direct than my exaggerated speaking. But he did convince me that it is a really, and so now I changed the libretto minorly, but also working with him, I knew that he could stage it. And so now it's going to be in there and it's going to be really scary. What I was going to tell you is that I think it's kind of a funny story, is that in this country you can buy keychains. They're plastic keychains with a fake key on them. And they say Overlook Hotel, room 237. And I bought one and I sent it to Paul Moravec, the composer. I happened to have been staying in a fancy hotel. So I stole their stationery and I wrote a note to him from this fancy hotel. And the note said, "Hey, lover, I'm in the bathtub. I'm in the bathtub waiting for you. The door is open." And because, that's how she dies. She's waiting for the young man to come and then he doesn't show up. So I sealed it and I sent it to him, with this fake, very florid old lady handwriting. And I sent it to him. And a week later, he got an email from me and he said, "Can you give me a call? Something really funny happened." And so I called him. And what happened is that Paul's wife, whose name is Wendy, Paul got the letter. He opened it and said, "Mark is so funny." And he put it down on the dresser and he left. And his wife came home and read it. And so Paul came home and his wife said, "Honey, we need to talk." And then she took out this note. And he was like, "Oh, no, that's just Mark Campbell being a practical joker." And then they all laughed. But
well, that's
she
good.
believed. Yeah, I know. Well, and it's also scary because you know what Paul's wife's name is Wendy.
Right.
And so Paul tells these stories about writing this opera, and Paul will describe himself as a method composer. So he stands up in his studio and he's reading the libretto over in his mind and screaming it out. And so he'll stand up and go, "Come here, you bitch, Wendy." And and then Wendy's like, "Paul," and he's like, no, I'm working on the opera." So it's been very funny, and she's a really lovely woman. Bless her.
That's a great
that she's
story.
had to endure. Yeah, I know, and she's had to endure 3 years of him being in his studio screaming out, "Wendy!" Thank God he doesn't have a kid named Danny. That would be way too much.
Yeah.
So how does the music match up to your libretto? Like, were you blown away by when the two come together? Is that?
Yes, I was blown away. I have to admit, initially I went, "Wow, this is so complicated." The music at first, I was worried that it sounded too complicated, but that's just me. I'm too limited in the way I hear music, and I've worked with over 30 composers in contemporary opera. I should have a better ear. Now I think it's an absolutely brilliant. I mean, it's what Paul has done with this opera is it's. I think he's rescued it with his music from veering into what I would call melodrama, and we're all aware of how opera can become like, wah! This, and a lot of us don't go to it because it's so melodramatic and so silly. And I really think the integrity of the music is what is so strong, and I think it really lent a lot more profundity and depth to this opera than the libretto did.
Mm-hmm.
I think he found just such depth in this story, and he, we worked very closely before. I wrote the libretto first, but then we worked very closely in making adjustments so that he had characters that he could understand and write with depth. And I think he really found the way to write Jack Nicholson. I can't believe I said that. It's horrible. That's like the last thing I should say.
Character, right?
Jesus. Sorry, Jack Torrance. I really think he found his way into understanding Jack and the tragedy of his character. He's created a tragic figure in Jack.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
Do you think that an opera demands more focus and attention from the audience to follow it? Because not being used to see opera, I imagine that you have to. It's not as clear as when someone speaks a line, like in the movie or in theater.
Absolutely.
When they sing. So it demands a little more about from the audience.
It definitely demands more. And fortunately, a lot of opera audiences are willing to give it. It demands more, but on the other hand, if you have a great composer like Paul Moravec, I'm so lucky I get to work with so many great composers, but they will also help the audience understand what the feeling is. And so we do not get, in a cinema, you can cut away from a person and then suddenly another scary person appears in the frame and we jump out of our seats.
Yeah.
We may not get that, but we do get an orchestra of 60-something instruments pounding away and a singer that is singing with real force and power. I do think that the opera is so drastically different from any other form. But I do think that this opera has been very true to the original material, very true to it. I don't know if it demands a closer attention from the audience. I think it demands a different attention. I think what we face in The Shining, of course, is the mythology of the original work. So many people, when I said I'm doing an adaptation of The Shining, they make fun of it. My good friends make fun of it. And say, "Oh, I can't wait to hear, here's Johnny." And they do this bad imitation of bad opera. Yeah. And then I get to stop them and say, "Oh, well, actually, that's not in the book, so I didn't include it."
And then they're disappointed.
I think yes, and they're disappointed. So I want everyone to know that when they see The Shining, the opera, they are not seeing the novel simply put on the stage. They're not seeing a retelling of the movie, certainly. They're not seeing a retelling of the TV show. Opera has its own demands and its own advantages in telling a story.
How long is the opera?
8 hours with 4 intermissions. No, it's only... People think that all operas... I don't write long operas. I really don't. I don't think that anyone deserves them. I apologize for saying this, but I have yet to see a Wagner opera, mostly because I don't want to sit in a theater that long. The opera is 2 hours.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I tell stories quickly, and I hope that I hit all the right emotional notes as I'm doing that. I think there's a 20-minute intermission, and the Act 1 finale gives the audience a great deal of reasons to come back and not go home and watch television. What I do at the end of Act 1 is, or what Paul and I do, is, and this was another decision early on, is that we do not see any of the ghosts of the Overlook Hotel. We hear of them, and we hear them as voices, but we do not see them on stage until the end of Act One. And that's when they all come out. And that's when the hotel starts to fall apart behind Jack Torrance. And what sets this off, basically, is hearing his father's voice on the CB radio. And that sets off another thing. Here's that voice. He smashes the CB radio. Wendy comes in and says, what happened? What happened? And Jack explains it. And she says, yes, but that was our only contact to the outside world. Right before he smashes the CB radio, we also learn that the biggest snowstorm in 30 years is coming to, and which seals off the Overlook, as you know, from the outside world. And she says, you just destroyed our only contact to the outside world. And then they realize that they don't know where Danny is. They open the door, and Danny is standing there with lipstick on his face and bruise marks around his neck, and he's wet from being in the shower. Mm-hmm. They start arguing. Jack pulls his family downstage, and he says, listen, I'm the father. I'm the protector. You have to trust me. You have to rely on me in this. As he's singing that, all of the ghosts that we've heard of, the gangsters, Mrs. Massey, the Gradys, the Grady girls, which, as you know, are not twins in the novel. They're just sisters. And that's scary enough. Every other ghost that we've heard experienced in the hotel, the man in the dog mask, Derwin, they all come forward at this moment and they sing over him in this crazy number. And then it becomes New Year's Eve, 1945, that big party. And they start going, 3, 2, 1, 3, 1, 3, 2, 1. And they do that, and suddenly this crooner starts singing a song of the day over all of this. And this explodes into this crazy music. The hotel is just melting behind them. And then it reaches this crazy climax and suspends. And then Danny screams out, Hollerin', come quick. Help us, Hollerin'. And then it starts to snow and the curtain falls. That's it.
Wow.
So you can see there's nothing in that finale that is not in the novel. It was just taking all of these elements and putting them together so that it's an opera, you know?
Right.
So it's really exciting.
Yeah, it sounds exciting. You do a good job of selling it.
I have to sell American opera all the time, and it's not an easy sell because people have such prejudice against opera. And it's a prejudice that I understand. I also go to opera and I find most of it so boring and so long and so pretentious and silly. The stories are so silly all the time. And I think I here in America and also in Canada, by the way, not as much in Europe. It's in England, yes, but not in Germany or in France for that matter. We're creating operas that are trying to bring in a larger audience.
Right.
And I will say this, a younger and less wealthy audience. And I think we're succeeding by finding stories like The Shining and adapting them. And I think people are a little bit less fearful of opera, saying, oh, well, I really like that story. And yet the music is still as challenging and difficult and makes them think about things. So I think we're really succeeding in that. And I feel really privileged to be part of that.
Mm-hmm. And it might be a good way to get people who isn't that into opera to check it out. And
that's what we're really hoping. I mean, I'm really hoping that we get people who have never seen an opera before, who love Stephen King.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And my greatest dreams would be for these people to come to this opera and say, wow, that was really great. What are they doing next year? Let's sign up for a subscription. You know, like,
yep.
I would love that to happen. And it sounds maybe a little bit silly or self-serving to want to increase the size of the audience for American opera, but it's a mission I have. And so that's why I'm always so eager to blab about it the way I am now,
mm-hmm.
and so eager that you guys have reached out, or maybe our publicist reached out to you. However, you were open to having me on and talking about opera because, you know, we will only reach, you have an amazing large audience. Congratulations on that. And we will only reach a larger audience if we go through venues like this. So I'm very, very grateful to you guys for having me on. That's for sure.
Yeah, we're really glad to have you on as well, because this is interesting, because Stephen King is very open to having his stuff done in
Different
many
ways.
different ways. Yeah. So
Yes.
so this is one other way that he's getting his stories out. So this is
He is, and
really
there
interesting.
there is another Stephen King opera. This is not the first. Dolores Claiborne was adapted into an opera that was done at San Francisco Opera, I think about 2 years ago.
Yeah, that sounds familiar. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so Stephen King seems very open to this idea, but I think you have to show respect for the story.
Yeah.
And I personally don't understand why you would choose one of his stories and not respect it. The thing that's difficult is that there is so much good material to choose from that it's really hard to narrow it down and turn it into, for example, take a close to 500-page novel and turn it into a 2-hour opera. So it's cool.
Yeah. It's interesting because, as Stephen King fans, we're fascinated to see his work being put out on so many different venues. Like, because he's just done a musical with John Cougar Mellencamp, Ghost Brothers.
Absolutely.
Right now, I don't know if it's still playing, and maybe you've seen it, is the Misery Broadway play.
I haven't seen it, but yeah.
And there was there's been a Carrie musical.
Yeah, not so successful.
Not so successful. So it's very interesting. And I think it speaks to and I think you've alluded to this, it speaks to the universality of the themes that King incorporates into his stories that makes them so adaptable to so many different mediums, not just movies and television, but these various artistic musical types of interpretations as well.
I do too. I also think that his best work strikes a real primal chord. And the best of opera does the same thing. And he has all these things going on, these wonderful perspectives and a lovely moving story, but there's some thing that he can do, as you know, where he can key in some primal way into our nightmares, into our darkest fears.
Absolutely.
For example, the fear, and I don't know about you, but I grew up with this, the fear that your father, the man who you rely on as a child and who your mother appears to rely on in, a traditional family, could turn into a violent murderer. I mean, I remember when I was a kid and I read about a father. I live in America where this is sadly a very common occurrence because of our stupid gun laws. Sorry, don't mean to get all radical on you.
Well, that's okay. We're on the outside looking in, so.
Yeah, and if we let this idiot Trump into, and that is for your readers. If you all are voting for Trump, please turn off the radio right now, or turn off your computers right now. If we vote for this idiot Trump, if he becomes president, I am moving to Cape Breton and opening a goat farm. I swear to God, because I do not want to be a part of this country if that's who they would put into office. Anyway, but I remember reading as a kid about, or hearing about it, maybe on TV, about a father who had slayed his family. And I looked at my father in a whole different way from then on. I was terrified. I remember being kind of terrified, what, a father could be violent? A father, the man that you look up to, could suddenly turn and be evil? I mean, I know I'm being dramatic, but I'm just saying, Stephen King really knows how to tap into those. And I think a lot of children, when they first learn that there is violence in their parents, and I'm lucky in that I never had to experience that. So I apologize to the people who have, but to know that and to have Stephen King tap into that fear, I think it's very real and very primal. And, music does the same thing. Music, when it's good, appeals to something very, very deep in us. We can't analyze it. And there's no reason to analyze it. We just need to feel it. And that's one thing he's a great storyteller, but I also think what makes him so successful is that he has found some way to key into those things that scare us the most.
Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So for your next project, you should do the flip side. The flip side of that is the fear of a parent losing a child, and you should do Pet Sematary.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yes.
That one.
I haven't read Pet Sematary. I would love to.
Read it. You would love it. Very few sets, a house, a pet cemetery, maybe a graveyard, and you're good.
And wait, let me ask you something really stupid. Your audience is going to laugh at this, but do the pets come alive?
No, well, they
There
do.
animals in it? I always assumed there were like animals in it.
It's kind of like the monkey's paw, if you're familiar with that.
Oh wow!
Something comes alive. Something terrible happens that a parent's worst nightmare.
Wow, I would love to do this.
Yeah, it's the flip side of The Shining. So
yes,
you would love it.
We could do like a whole series. Wagner has the ring.
Yep.
Yeah. It's funny. One of my next projects, I have several coming up, but in 2017, I have 4 premieres. One is an opera about Steve Jobs with a composer named Mason Bates, and that's for Santa Fe Opera, a really amazing company. Another one is Dinner at 8 with a composer named Bill Bolcom, and that's for Minnesota Opera, and that's like a 1930s comedy, really opposite from The Shining. And then another one is for Houston Grand Opera with Laura Kaminsky and Kimberly Reed, and that's set in the Rothko Chapel in Houston, which was created by the artist Mark Rothko, but is really just a human story about how art connects with people. But then the fourth one is actually really brilliant. Not the opera. It hasn't been written yet. I don't know if it's going to be brilliant. But the novel that it's based on is brilliant. It's called The Trial of Elizabeth Cree by Peter Ackroyd. And it's a mystery and also a horror story about a murderer that's very much like Jack the Ripper, but it brings in the British music hall. So I did an interview last week with someone in Minnesota, and she asked me, she said, "What's up with you? You seem to be doing all these dark stories." Because last year I did Manchurian Candidate. And she goes, "Do you like to scare people?" And I said, "Yeah, I do. I really do." So since I can't, dress up in a really scary costume and walk around the streets and scare people, I'll just do it in a damn theater.
Yeah.
And I remember meeting with Stephen Sondheim years ago, and boy, that's a name to drop, right?
Yeah, really.
And I'm sorry, but
okay.
he's an amazing man and an amazing teacher also. Even though he doesn't teach, directly. But I was meeting with him, and I'm a huge fan of Sweeney Todd. I just think Sweeney Todd is one of the best. I call it an opera, but I think it's just really amazing. And I remember him telling me, he said, all I ever wanted to do with that is just scare people. And I said, I think that's the best artistic statement I've ever heard. I just want to scare people.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very good. Yeah. So you sound like a busy guy, so you probably don't have time to read the book, but there's a movie version of it too that you might want to just check out just to get lay of the land.
I ain't going to do that. I'm going to read the book.
Okay.
And even if the movie version is better, truer.
No, the book is better.
Yeah, the book is going to be better.
Absolutely. It's his darkest book he's ever done.
And I don't want to experience the same thing that happened with The Shining, in which I saw the movie first.
Oh, okay.
And it affected me. It was, after reading the book, I have to say it was, as much as I love the movie because I think I like Stanley Kubrick, it was really easy for me to get rid of the movie when I was writing the libretto because the novel was so strong and so present in my mind that there was no question that I didn't need to put all work in play, make Jack a dull boy. Because that's not in the novel. And so it was really easy to forget all that stuff.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So is there any chance that the opera will tour in the US, or is it just for one place?
We are really, really hoping. Our biggest dreams right now, and Stephen King actually has permission to allow it to go to other opera companies, and that's one reason we hope that he comes so that he can see it and give the opera his blessing. We really hope that it goes to other opera companies around the world. I wrote an opera called Silent Night that got the 2012 Pulitzer Prize in Music, and that has gone many places. And we are really hoping that this gets to go to other opera companies. Unfortunately, Sweden does not really do American operas. So I think you're going to have to come here.
Yeah. Well, I have a reason to come there then.
Oh, good. Oh, great. Well, if you want to head out to Minneapolis, I'll get you guys tickets. We're sold out, but I'll find a way. So, it's not an easy flight. It's easier from Alberta.
Yes.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit too long, but it would be nice.
That's okay. It's longer than the opera, that's for sure.
I think it would be good for like operas and Broadway plays. Then obviously maybe not during the run, but I think if they would start recording and these things later on, I think they could help generate interest, for these productions.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's key. That's the way you get things done is a recording. And I don't know if we're going to be able to manage that with our current contract.
Yeah.
I think Calgary Opera may be coming. Yeah, Bob McPhee from Calgary Opera. I'm hoping he's coming down. And
cool.
I've emailed him and said, you really should bring this because that's a great company. So that's not too far.
Nope. That's good. That's their 3-hour drive. That's not too bad.
Yeah. And so if he does, we'll reconnect over that.
Right.
Yeah, definitely.
Right. Yeah. So where are you right now with your production? Has it started or it's starting or?
No, we've been in rehearsal. I was in Minneapolis last week for basically the first week of rehearsal.
Okay.
In opera, it's really kind of wonderful because the orchestra, the singers get the score very early on. And they work on it. They start learning the music like months before you have your first rehearsal.
Okay.
We had our first rehearsal and our first design presentation last week. And so we are rehearsing, and it's very exciting. Eric Simonson, our director, is just doing a great job of getting this whole chorus of ghosts to move in and then suddenly have to disappear, as they do in Act 2. They're there at the bar, and then all of a sudden they're gone. And he's just doing it's very exciting. To be frank, this is my favorite part, rehearsing, because we're all working on a story together. And the performance is fine, but then, there's that thing called the audience.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you just hope that they're going to really be engaged by the story. I think they will be, but the fun part is in rehearsal because we're solving all these issues. Like if Jack enters from that side, is that more powerful than if he just jumps up from behind the bar?
Yep.
That sort of thing.
Cool.
So when is the premiere?
The premiere is May 7th at the Ordway Theater in St. Paul, not in Minneapolis. And to get tickets, you would go on to the Minnesota Opera website. And I'm sorry. I think it's 8:00 on May 7th. It's a 2-hour opera. There's a 20-minute intermission, which is always, opera intermissions are always kind of fun because people start drinking champagne and they're a little bit more fun than like theater intermissions. What else? There are 4 performances. Gosh, the 7th, the 12th, the 13th, and the 14th, I believe. I think the 7th, the 12th, the 7th, the 12th, the 14th, and the 15th. That's what it is. The 15th is a matinee at 2:00 p.m.
Okay, and they can double check on the site for where they ordered.
Yeah, on the Minnesota Opera website, because I always double check when I have to give information like this. I invariably screw it up. So
no worries.
It's probably not even this year. It's probably 20 years from now, and in June. I don't know. But no, if they just check on the website, and there are still tickets available. But gosh, if you have any interest in going, please get your tickets now because this week is going to sell out for sure.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well,
that's great.
Yeah, we want to thank you very much for coming on. I think if it's got any measure of the enthusiasm that you've brought to this interview in it, I'm sure it's going to be a very excellent show to see.
Oh, thanks, guys. That's cool. And thank you for having me on.
Oh, it's very illuminating.
Means a lot.
Yeah.
It's the first time I've done something like this. I'm usually talking with stupid opera critics. Oh, sorry, that got me a few bad reviews probably. But I'm usually talking with like critics and stuff, and your questions were great, by the way.
Good.
I know you were concerned about that. They were some of the best questions I've had. So
awesome.
I think it helps. Well, it helps that you love the story so much.
And it sounds like you do too. So
I do. I really do. And that's the difference between you guys and I think the critics.
Yes.
Because the critics are often snobs and they come into this going, well, how are you going to turn this into an opera? And you guys had none of that. So I really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you very much. And like I said, look up Pet Cemetery. I think it's right up your alley.
I definitely will. I just have to find a company that will produce it. Maybe someone's listening to this right now. And so that would be fantastic.
Yes. Well, thanks very much, Mark. Also, the best success with The Shining the Opera.
Great.
Yeah.
Great. Bye, guys.
Take care.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
we are going to have one more exciting thing about 11/22/63 before it's close the book on that one for a while, because it's been a lot of 11/22/63 episodes right now.
Yeah, right.
But we are going to do an interview with a fellow who was an extra in JFK assassination scene.
Oh, yes, that's right. I totally forgot about that.
Yes.
We had so much on our plate lately. It's hard to keep track of everything.
So we're
It's a
going
good
to
thing
talk
we
to
didn't
him.
have him on today.
Yeah.
It'd be like 3 hours long.
Yep.
Okay.
But we're going to talk to him about how it was to shoot that scene, how it is to be an extra, and everything else. So if any of you have any questions for him, please send them in. Facebook, Twitter, email, SpeakPipe. If you use the SpeakPipe, you will get an extra star from us. We want to hear your voice. This is audio podcast after all.
Yeah.
But please do send in the questions and we will ask them, or if you do it by the SpeakPipe, you do it yourself and you can hear his answers in the next episode.
Awesome. And who knows, it could be another surprisingly fantastic. I don't want to use surprisingly in the wrong way, but it's just our guest today, Mark, was just so energetic and so full of energy that it was really fun talking to something about him that we don't really know much about. So hopefully that will happen again with our next guest.
Yeah, and I think he thought it was fun to talk about with it to us as well, because we weren't the usual people he talked to about operas.
That's right.
Yeah.
Okay, so there you go, folks. Another supersized episode. Recording-wise, we're almost up to 2 hours. I don't think it'll play out that long once I do a bit of editing, but I hope you guys are going to enjoy this. And until our next podcast, stay safe.
But
stay scared.
Bye-bye.
The end. Bool. Whew. Man, oh man.